Mac Power Users, episode 635, Workflows with Allison Sheridan. Hello, everyone. This is David Sparks. I am your host, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Stephen Hackett. How are you today, Stephen?
I'm good, David. How are you?
Oh, man, it's so fun making Mac Power Users and doing this show every week. I'm having a great time.
Good.
What a great day.
We got
nice
another good
weather
one today.
Here. We're having good weather. It's all good, brother. It's all good. And we got a friend on the show today. Welcome to the show, Allison Sheridan.
Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Allison, I was looking, because you've been a friend of mine since before Mac Power Users existed. I don't think you've ever been on the show before.
You know, I was trying to remember that. I thought you said I had been once, but maybe I dreamt it. Yeah, 635 episodes. Okay, I'm glad you thought I was worthy by now.
Well, we wrote that down one day when you and I were at Macworld. I said, and if we get to 635, then we'll put out Allison on. Well, okay, if you don't know Allison is over at Podfeet. She's been podcasting longer than the Mac Power Users has been in existence. How many shows you got over there now, Allison?
I should know that off the top of my head. It's more than 800. I know that. It's been going for 17 years. Without missing an episode. It'll be 17 years in May without missing an episode, and it comes out every single week.
Yeah, and you do it on the weekend, and it's a great show.
882, almost 900.
Yeah, that's nice. I was looking the other day. I've got a bunch of, when I add up all my shows, I have published a lot of podcasts in my time in the chair. I do think that every week thing becomes a burden, though, right, at some point?
Yeah, so I also do a series called Chit Chat Across the Pond, and it's sort of, I would never have invented this way, but it's two shows. It's Chit Chat Across the Pond Light, which is me interviewing people I find interesting in tech, and then the other half of it is Programming by Stealth with Bart Busschots, where we're doing a programming podcast in an audio podcast, which sounds really crazy, but it's actually working. And the light Chit Chat Across the Pond is the one that I like better because it has missed weeks. And once I realized it had missed weeks, I went, oh, okay, if I feel like it, I will, but I don't always do it. It comes out pretty often, but maybe 3 times a month.
It's like getting the first scratch on a new car. It's like, okay, now I can breathe. It's okay.
Actually, I lied about 3 times a month. It's every other week. So it might be 1 or 2 per month because Programming by Stealth is the opposite one. Very confusing. But yeah, very much like the first scratch.
And we had a few times where Katie couldn't make it, or a few times where Stephen couldn't make it. And I haven't missed an episode of Mac Power Users yet. And it's starting to feel like a weight around my neck. It's like we got like family stuff come out. No, I really have to get this recorded. I can't make this the one that I miss. And,
I don't want to lie, though. I have not always been the host of every show. When I go on vacation, usually Bart Busschots and Alistair Jenks take over. Okay. And actually, Katie has done the show before. She did it a couple of times, and a couple other people. So yeah, it's not always me, but the show has never missed.
The show must go on.
Exactly.
Well, Allison, how did you get started with? Well, actually, before we get started on talking to Allison, we do have a couple announcements this week. On More Power Users today, Stephen received delivery of a very pretty white Apple box with a heavy box-looking device inside of it. You got your new Mac, right?
Yeah, I spent all weekend setting up my Mac studio, and I've got some early impressions we can talk about for members. Spoiler alert, it's very good.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm not sure. I might actually tune out for that section. Just let Stephen talk. It might not be good for me to be present for that. But we're gonna do that for More Power Users today. I am doing a webinar. I've been trying to do one about every 6 weeks. So I've got one scheduled for April 21st. It's all about calendar workflows. I've been talking on the show lately about all the crazy stuff I'm doing with my calendar. We've been working on it in the labs, and a bunch of labs members and I have given me feedback. And I've got some good workflows for the calendar. So it's going to be April 21st at 10 a.m. The initial batch of emails went out. I thought it was on a 24-hour clock, but it wasn't. So it went out at 10 p.m. It's not 10 p.m. It's 10 a.m., guys, of course. So April 21st, 10 a.m. We'll put a link in the show notes. You can sign up for that webinar if you want to check it out. But Allison, how did you get started with your interest in Apple?
Oh, okay. Actually, in 1984, our friend Calvin Yoon bought a 128K Mac, and he asked us to come over to his house and see it. And it wasn't actually me who thought that's what we got to have. It was my husband, Steve.
Yeah.
And so we ended up buying the 512K Mac and had so much fun with it. There was basically never any decision beyond that. Faltered a little bit during the terrible years. Bought a used Mac from a friend of mine. Didn't quite get my nerve up to buy another new one, but luckily rode that wave out and never looked back. I never had a Windows machine in my house other than something I brought home from work. So it's been all Mac, all Apple all the time.
It was such a, I mean, for people who are younger, I really can't understate the difference between the Mac and everything else at the time. It was like night and day.
I can describe that really well in just a little tiny nugget here. We had compact computers at work with actual like tape, like cassette tapes that you wrote things on. And I was trying to write a Pascal program, and I was really struggling with it and trying to get it to work. And then they brought a Mac into my office, and I put the same program in, and it put a bug on the screen, like a bug, like with legs and everything next to the line that was wrong. And I went, oh, there it is. And I thought, well, that's a different way to do it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've said this on the show before, but for me, it was the system preferences because everything was command line. So like if you wanted to change the key press speed, you had to figure out the command line, incantation. And with this, it was a tortoise and a hare. And I'm like, oh, okay, these guys get it. And that was like the beginning of the computer revolution as far as I'm concerned. I mean, people that had IBM PCs, even Apple IIs, you had to have like an inherent nerd level to do that stuff because everything was command line. And
we're
also,
not against the nerd level.
No,
right?
I'm not.
I mean, we embrace it.
But for everybody to embrace computers, it took the graphical user interface. And I remember at the time, the big battle was the folks who said we don't need the GUI. It's like, oh no, it's okay. We can all do command line. We don't need this craziness, right?
My brother said we never need a mouse. What would we need a mouse for?
It's always something. We don't need the touch interface. We don't need, whatever it is, we don't need it anymore.
I do have to say though, when the 512K Mac was out and everybody was using it, we'd gone to the Mac Plus and everything, people started saying we needed a bigger screen. And I said, why would you ever need a bigger screen than that?
Yeah.
That's unnecessary. And why would you ever need color? Yeah. I don't see it.
I was always a Retina guy. I was always more about pixel density than color. And at the time, there were monitors that were higher density but single color, and that would be it for me. And even to go further back, and I'm sure I think I'm even boring Steven at this point, but I actually learned a program on a Tandy color computer, which was not mine. It was in the Radio Shack, and I would ride my 10 speed. I was like 10 or 11, and they had it on the floor, and I would sit there for like 4 hours a day in programs like I worked there, And then when the customers would come in, the guys would say, hey, Dave, you got to get up. And I'd get up, and then they'd show them the program I wrote, And it had 4K of memory, and then they came out with the 8K version. We're like, why would you need 8K? Yeah. Anyway, okay. Enough of that. So you've been into the Mac since day one. What did you do? I mean, what were your thoughts during those, the mid 90s where things were looking a little rough?
If I had known how bad it was, I would have had completely different thoughts. I mean, to know now they were like within weeks of bankruptcy, I had no idea. Yeah. I was just really annoyed by the confusion. There were so many models, and you couldn't figure out what to buy or what the difference was between them. I never really considered buying a PC, and I didn't, like I said, I didn't understand exactly how much the company was faltering. So it wasn't, there was no emotion about it other than annoyance that I couldn't figure out what to buy, and I wasn't sure, that, like I said, that's why I bought a buddy of mine's used Mac at the time.
But at some point, you went from Apple user enthusiast to podcaster. And, I say press. I mean, you began covering Apple. And that's, 890 episodes ago when you got started with Podfeed. How did that happen?
I'm not really a news podcaster. I leave that to everybody else. I do more technical descriptions and teaching about apps and how they work and things I've learned how to do on my Mac, programming stuff, terminal stuff. That's a little bit more my bent. And I also have a pretty big focus on accessibility. So when I test out an app, I often test it with VoiceOver, for example, to find out whether it's accessible. I got into it because I found that I was just stopping people everywhere in grocery store lines, telling them what I knew. And I thought, when I heard about podcasting, I thought, wow, it might be interesting to do it to people who chose to listen to me.
Yeah.
It didn't stop me from doing it at grocery store lines, of course, but it was something that sounded like fun. Around the time that I started, my brother Kelly passed away, and Kelly was one of these people who would just do stuff, like he lived in Hawaii on the Big Island, and he thought, you know what, I think I'll buy property in Kauai and I'll build an organic farm. And he just went and did it. And I could hear him saying, as I was rolling around the idea of maybe I could start a podcast, he said, just do it, man. Just Nike all over that.
So true. Yeah.
And so I did. And that was in May of 2005. And my show has evolved completely, which I think is a lesson, is just start. See if you've got the run room and hopefully make a really bad first episode or first 10 episodes, because then you can look back at them and laugh. I know some people, these guys do this show called iBites, and they've only done like 3 episodes. Their first episode, they killed it. And I told them, I said, that's a terrible mistake. You're not going to be able to go back and laugh at that one at all.
Yeah, Katie and I, we've shared on the show, when we recorded the first episode of Mac Power Users, we finished the entire show. And then I said, hey, you want to do that again? And she's like, yes. And so the very first episode of Mac Power Users actually was recorded twice. But I think there's something to that. Also, the nice thing is when you get started in kind of this new content world, usually the stakes aren't real high when you get started. So it's okay if you flub things up and make some mistakes. You just learn as you go along, kind of build the parachute on the way down, as they say.
Yeah, I do remember distinctly one specific event. I did 4 episodes. I used to go to the All Things Digital conference from the Wall Street Journal.
Sure.
And so my second, third, and fourth episodes were about that conference and what I learned. And Steve Jobs and Bill Gates were there that year. So it was a big year to get to do that. But I pod faded. I stopped. So when I say 17 years, it's after this couple of week gap. And a guy named Neil wrote to me and he said, "Where's the podcast?" And it was the first time anybody told me they were actually listening, and I was hooked. That was it. From that day forward, I never missed an episode.
You do feel that pressure. Daisy and I have a little side project where we're doing some vlogging at Disneyland, and somebody wrote us recently saying, I keep checking, you guys haven't put anything up for like a month, and it's like, oh man, now I'm feeling it on that too.
Yeah. I had a deafblind guy write to me. My podcast is actually scripted. So I write these enormous blog posts and I write about 5,000 words a week. And then that becomes the episode, all of those blog posts put together. And I got an email once from a deafblind guy, and he told me, he said, I have a Mac Mini and a Braille display, and I read your blog. And so never stop doing it. Please never contact me. Goodbye. Like, he didn't want to engage. He just wanted me to know he was there. And I imagine he's still there. He may or may not be, but I imagine that he is. And I will always keep doing those blog posts for him.
It's always this interesting trade-off, right? Once you start getting feedback from an audience, because I found over the years, sometimes an audience may want to pull you in one direction or another, and it's up to you as the creator to see if that's actually what you should do or not. Sometimes it is good feedback that you should listen to and make adjustments for, and other times it's changes something into something you don't want to make. And I always find those moments interesting to consider kind of where things are and where they should go.
I love that you brought that up, Stephen. That I definitely think a lot about. A lot of podcasters I know do a survey. I'm never doing a survey. I don't want to do what they want to do. I want to do what I want to do. And if I don't end up with a huge audience, that's okay. I can't do something I'm not passionate about. I've had people make suggestions. I'm like, yeah, that's really adorable. Why don't you go make that podcast? I don't want to. This is what I'm doing. I'm having fun. I love what I'm doing. I write about what I'm passionate about. And if I'm not passionate, it's just going to stink.
Well, one of the nice things about any degree of success in this stuff is anything you do, you'll get email telling you how great it was and how bad it was. So anybody who's ever written me to complain about something or tell me how great something is, I guarantee you I've received email on the inverse of that. And after a while, you just don't pay that close of attention to it because you just make what you want to make. You make your thing and you hope that resonates with people. I'm with you, but
you
I do
can't
think
keep going forever. Like this wheel turning, you can't keep it turning if you're doing stuff you're not passionate about, or not being allowed to do something you are passionate about. So
another thing I think people get in trouble with when they try and do this stuff is if they try to play a role, and you can't sustain that. I mean, when you listen to the show, I mean, between the three of us, we've got, I don't know, a couple thousand episodes under our belt.
Right.
You can't play a role. You just got to be who you are, and people either like that or they don't like that. But it's, I think that, like if you're an actor and you're in a movie, you play a role. But when you're on a podcast, you just got to be yourself. It's too stressful to try and be anything but yourself.
My favorite piece of criticism I ever got was a comment on one of my posts that basically just slammed me and said how terrible the show was. And I thought about it for a while, and I wrote back and I said, I'm sorry you don't like it, but you know what? I know a bunch of really good podcasters, and I listed off all of my Mac podcaster buddies from the Mac Roundtable. I said, let's get all of those. Here's all these different podcasts. And the guy wrote back, oh no, I never miss an episode.
Yeah, I know. Well, it is a strange world, but you got in it early. I mean, you got it into the days where you were manually creating your RSS feed, which makes me laugh.
Oh, yeah, that was so funny. Leo Laporte had started it wasn't Twit. Was it Twit? I forget. It must have been Twit. And I took his RSS feed and I read it and tried to learn how to make one of my own. So the syntax is pretty simple. And I started going through and picking it apart and figuring it out. And I got to the one point where every episode is called an item. And so you got little angle brackets item, close angle brackets item. And inside that, there's a bunch of information like title and episode number and all, whatever, what kind of type of file it is. Is it an MP3 or whatever? But then there was one line that said size. And it was this long number, like 12 digits or 14 digits. It was this great big number. I sat there looking at it going, what is that number of seconds? What the heck is it? Turns out it's bytes.
Yeah,
but that was the level of thing that how I was hacking this together with a chisel and a stone back then.
Yeah, but you stuck it out, and you've got a great show and a loyal audience, and hopefully some of the Mac Power users will go check out Podfeed as well.
Thanks. A big part of the audience for me, and I don't remember, I talked about this in my preamble to you guys, is that I do my show live on Sunday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and having the live show changed everything for me because there's a group of people who come every week and then, the people change over the years, but they get together as a community with each other and they're supportive and there's two guys that both have MS and they met each other in there, got to know each other and helping each other and stuff. And, it's not a one-way thing anymore. It's not Allison sitting alone in front of a microphone, which is really hard, which is why I script it. But it's a group of people watching me make the show. It's not the show, it's the making of the show. And it changed everything. I've made lifelong friends that I've met in real life now through doing the show live. That made every difference to me.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by Text Expander. Get your team communicating faster so they can focus on what's most important. With Text Expander, your team's knowledge is at their fingertips. Get your whole team on the same page by getting info out of silos and into the hands of everyone that needs to use it. With Text Expander, you can share your team's knowledge across departments so your team is sending a unified message to your customers and isn't spending time reinventing the wheel. Here's how it works. Store it. Keep your company's most used emails, phrases, messaging, URLs, and more right within Text Expander. Then share it. Get your whole team access to all the content they need to use every day. Organize it by department and then expand it. Deploy the content you need with just a few keystrokes on any device across any app you use. It's that easy. Text Expander is available on Mac, Windows, Chrome, iPhone, and iPad. And show listeners get 20% off their first year. Go to textexpander.com/MPU to learn more and sign up, or click the link in the show notes. Once again, that's TextExpander.com/MPU for 20% off your first year of TextExpander. My thanks to TextExpander for their support of the show and Relay FM.
All right, Allison, are you still rocking that 1984, or was I go maybe 1985 that the Mac 512 came out?
I think it was. Yeah. No. Sadly, we have moved on.
Okay.
I have the M1 Max 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I tried for a while having two Macs, and I just found it really tedious and annoying. I want everything exactly the same everywhere, and I know today with all the cloud services and everything, that's a lot easier and things sync and everything, but I don't see why to have a separate device. So I've got that hooked up to a Pro Display XDR because my husband is nuts and bought it for me for Christmas a year and a half ago. And so now I have 32 inches there and my 14-inch screen. And I just moved from the 16-inch, by the way, down to 14. Could not be happier going from 16 down to 14.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. First, the move from the 16 to the 14. What prompted that?
It's too heavy. I mean, it's got a beautiful display, but it's a desktop practically to me. It was,
Yeah.
I travel a lot. Well, under normal circumstances, I could travel a lot. And carrying a 15 or 16-inch laptop in my backpack has been a burden over the years. And I always thought I couldn't give it up. And 13 just seemed too small. So when 14 came out, I thought, all right, let me give it a whirl. And now my laptop actually leaves my desk. It never left my desk. I mean, unless I left the house, it never left the desk. It was always plugged into the dock. And now the laptop comes and goes all over the house with me.
Yeah, I'm kind of facing a similar dilemma because I have the 16 as well. And I bought the 16 because I do a lot of screencast recording. And because of my situation in the house with the kids, COVID, yada, yada, I'm moving around a lot. Like sometimes I record in the bedroom, sometimes I record at my studio desk. And so I'm always moving around, and I wanted a wider, more screencast friendly screen.
Mm-hmm.
But I've for the first time in many years, this has been my single Mac since I guess October of last year. And I've taken a few trips, and this thing is such a burden when you travel because it's like an expensive computer, and I'm totally freaked out. I'm going to get it broken or lost or whatever. It doesn't
And the
even
new
fit.
one weighs even more. It
Yeah.
weighs more than yours. I mean,
Yeah, they've beefed up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't even fit in my backpack properly.
Right.
So it's like I'm worried about the
fit in the
corners.
safe at the hotel.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit anywhere.
So I don't know what I'm going to do, but yeah, I kind of get that. But so did you buy an M1 MacBook Pro 16-inch and then downgrade to 14?
No. I had the 2019 Intel Core, what it would be, i7, i9, whatever the top of the line was at the time. And then I went to the M1 Max. And I bought the M1 Max not because that's what I needed, but it was like, oh, it just came out as the greatest thing ever. Push the button, hurry, push it.
Yeah, I know.
I have no idea if I needed it. I mean, I do a lot of screencasting too, and I don't know how to screencast without two displays, so I'm not quite sure how the 16 helps you. If I'm doing something remote, I've got a little CocoPar USB-C display. It's a 15-inch, terrible resolution. It's like 1080p. It's nasty, but I use that on the side, or I use my 12.9-inch iPad Pro as the secondary monitor.
Sure. And then the thing that it helps is that it's the wide. It's closer to 16:9, right on the screen. But now the other thing you said is that you're using the 14-inch screen plus the Pro Display XDR.
Yeah, a lot of people dock or put it in clamshell mode, and I don't know why. Why wouldn't you want another 14-inch display? Desk space, maybe?
Desk space. Also, I find it harder to focus on the little one with the big one. I mean, I just don't I've tried to set it up to get together, and because the big screen is so big, the laptop screen is pretty far away from where I'm sitting.
I've got mine at an angle, and it works pretty well. For screencasting in particular, I do everything on the 14-inch display, and then I do all the screen flow and my diagrams. I do a lot of mind mapping and stuff to do my tutorials, and that works better for me. And that way I can dumb down the screen on the 14-inch too to a resolution that somebody has a hope of being able to read and be able to see what's going on when they see it on a smaller display like an iPad.
Right.
Yeah, I got it. I got an email from a listener talking about he just bought the Mac Studio Ultra, and he's like, I have no need of the Ultra, but this is the one part of my life I always want to splurge, and I bought the Ultra. Don't judge me. And I'm like, okay, I got to be nicer on the show about that. Yeah. While not everybody needs the Ultra, there's nothing wrong with buying yourself a Max Studio Ultra.
I've got a listener who says, you know what? My wife loves me. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't gamble. I don't run around on her. I get to spend all the money I want on tech, and that's our deal.
Yeah.
How do you like the Pro Display XDR? I mean, for a while that was the only option from Apple, but now of course we have the Studio Display. Are you happy with that choice still?
I am. I don't need it.
Yeah, no one does.
I need the M1 Max, right? I mean, because I don't do, the accurate color doesn't matter to me. I like a really bright display, though. I've never understood why people lower the brightness on their display, because the brighter the display, the more your pupils contract. And when your pupils contract, you have a longer depth of field, so it's clearer. It's easier to focus. And so I like a really bright display. I know John Syracuse is always talking about how your eyeballs are burnt out if you turn it up all the way. I keep mine turned up all the way, all the time, always. So I don't understand that at all.
Especially when it's plugged in. I mean, on a laptop, I get it. Like if you're worried about battery life.
Power.
Yeah.
Right. But I do like it a lot. What I really, truly hated was the stand for that. I did a post recently where I did some research from NASA. They have statistics on the height of eye height to seat of women and men, because astronauts, right? Yeah. And so they've got all the math on, or the numbers, the statistics on the seat to eye height. And the Pro Display XDR in its stand at its lowest is 4.5 inches taller than the average eye height of an American white woman. If you're Asian, it's way worse than that. So all the men I know talk about, I have to put my display up on books. I would love to be able to put my display up on books to be able to see the top of the screen. So Steve had bought it for me. We sold that on eBay, and he bought me an articulated arm from Ergotron and the Visa mount. And I am so happy now. I've lowered it down to where my neck isn't killing me.
Yeah. And when you get a screen that big, it creates a whole set of new problems, right? That you don't normally have. I mean, when our screens were 14 inches, we didn't have to worry about that.
Well, even the 27-inch display was too high for me. I had a 24-inch Apple Cinema display that I loved, and 2 years and 11 months into Apple Care, it died, which was great timing, and Apple had to replace it, but they didn't make the 24 anymore, and they gave me the 27, and I didn't like it because it was too tall.
Yeah. So you're not going to be turning your Pro Display XDR on its side anytime soon. That's what I'm hearing.
I have for comedy. The day I got it, you can send the video from an iPhone or an iPad into it, and I did that. So it was a 32-inch tall iPhone.
Yeah, that is pretty funny, actually. I like that. Yeah, but now how is it working for you having that much screen real estate? I mean that's a lot of pixels. What are you doing with it all?
Well, it is great. During the live show, I definitely fill everything on the big display and on my, I move things over to the right, like Mimo Live is what we use to produce the show. Steve produces it from his brand new Apple Studio. And so I run that app and a couple other apps over on my Mac. And then I'm still using my iPad mini, believe it or not, is the controller for the touchscreen controller for Mimo Live. So like I can mute Steve if he forgets to mute himself, that kind of thing. And it is good. What I notice, and I know now why people really like these curved displays, is if I keep Hindenburg, my recording software, in the upper left, and when I have to do something like I need to line something up, I have to translate horizontally like 12 inches to the left to be able to see if I got it lined up right.
Yeah, and that's why I don't open my laptop next to mine, because it's too far out there. And the way
it's
my
overflow though. It's just for overflow. You throw your chat clients over there, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you use Spaces at all with that screen?
I've tried to love Spaces. I go through periods where I test it and I try using it, and I always end up, whatever I need is in a different space. I need to drag a file from the Finder. I need another Safari window, and all of a sudden it jumps over to the other one. So I don't use Spaces at all.
What about you, Steven? I don't think I've ever asked you that question. Are you a Spaces user?
I've got really three. I've got my main one, space number 2 has Tweetbot and Discord, so kind of like social media stuff. And then I have music full screen all the way to the right. But that's it. Not a real heavy user.
Yeah, I'm like, I kind of have reliable spaces. Like if I go to the left, all of my communication apps are there. And then if I go to the right,
How do you
it's
make it
my
reliable?
workspace.
How do you
Yeah,
make
you
it always
just-
end up in the same place?
I have a keyboard Maestro script that I run in that space that opens every app and sizes it for me. So I've got, Twitter, mail, messages, Slack, all that stuff opens up because you've got this huge screen. You can put them all. You can put all the apps on the screen at once, and it's in a nice grid. I'll send you a picture.
So I understand doing that. I've got a Keyboard Maestro script that starts up my live show and
Yeah.
sets all the windows into the right positions and stuff. But I unplug my laptop and plug it back in, and I put something in full screen. And it ends up in a space 4 spaces to the right.
Yeah, well, I don't have that problem. But when I unplug, I completely leave that space alone, and I don't touch it. I could run another script on it to resize everything, but I usually when I unplug it, it's for the purpose of recording a show or a screencast. I don't care about that stuff when I'm doing that. And then when I plug it back into my monitor, everything goes back to normal. So I've actually had good experience with it, but I also only have 3 spaces, so they can't go 4 spaces to the right because there aren't 4.
Well, it makes them up on its own, though. I didn't ever
Wow.
tell it to do that.
Well, I think maybe your computer doesn't like you that much, Allison.
There's that.
So we've talked about your Mac setup using MacBook Pro, this big, beautiful display. What about the iPad? Does that fit into your workflow anywhere?
It depends on which iPad you're talking about. I cannot figure out for the life of me what to do with an iPad mini. Like I said, I use it as the control surface for Mimo Live, and that is literally it. Mostly it's because I can't type on it, I think. I don't enjoy typing on it with my fingers, there's nothing natural about using that. And I have to contribute. I think people who are good at consuming things, like who can read Twitter without writing back to Twitter, that'd be great, but I can't do it. I like a Kindle better than an iPad for reading books. I just don't find any use for it at all. On the other hand, my 12.9-inch iPad Pro is the bomb. I love it with the Magic Keyboard. And I use it constantly. I use it as essentially my TV to watch video podcasts. And I watch the Hulu and, I watch my Chick TV shows on that. But I also write on it a lot. And I might be jumping ahead a little bit here because we're going to talk about it later. But Ulysses is my tool of choice because it works so well on the iPad and on the Mac, syncs perfectly, and uses Text Expander. With those things together, it's worth every penny for me. But I use it like crazy. The iPad Pro is a big part of everything I do.
Well, I have a suggestion for you. I don't know how low your screen is now. It sounds like it's pretty low to the table. But if you have any space under that big Mac screen, put your 12.9-inch iPad underneath it, even if it's laying down a bit. And it's really like, that is my second monitor because it's awesome. I can do iPad stuff. I can, if I want to have a YouTube playing in the background. Also now with what is it, Control Center that you, what do you call that, Stephen? The new feature where you drag your mouse on.
Yeah, I know what you're
Universal
talking
Control. There we go.
There it
Universal Control. With Universal Control, I can drag my mouse on it, use my keyboard. I don't even have to get a multi-radio keyboard. It all works with one. Man, I love having that iPad screen down there. And I use that as my reference monitor. Like when I'm recording or something, I'll just make that a sidecar monitor, and then I'll put all the recording tools down there. So I find so many uses for that.
So
with a Mac.
There's no way I could put it under. My monitor is less than an inch from the table.
Okay.
So not there, but I have the iPad mini sitting in front that I could do some more stuff with, put chat clients down there. I've got enough screen real estate for that. I do use the big iPad. The small iPad, I just don't see why. But the big iPad, sure, is a second monitor. And even now that Sidecar, I don't know when this changed, but I didn't use Sidecar for well over a year. And I just noticed that you can now get rid of that stupid bar on the left-hand side and expand it. Yeah. So it's a lot more useful there. But it's also sitting right there with a keyboard. So it's not like that's magical. I don't know.
Yeah, I had planned on selling mine. It's the 2018. It's the very first blocky, square-sided iPad Pro. Mm-hmm. And I had planned on selling it because I wasn't using it much. And I thought, well, before I send it off, let me just try this. And it was immediately like, yes, this is something I need in my life, and not going to sell this. Yeah. What about the iPhone? Which iPhone are you using?
The 13 Pro, and I love it. Mostly because I care about the camera. Again, didn't need the 13 Pro because I had a 12 Pro, but could get it. So the iPhone 13 Pro is awesome with the camera. Like I said, I have grandchildren. Might be a few photos of them on there.
Just a few.
I'm really into the doing the macro stuff too.
Yeah, I got to do more macro stuff. Everybody that comes on the show tells me how much they love macro, and I just almost never use it.
Take your phone and point it at your pant leg right now, and look at how close you can get that lens. You can get it like down to an inch. It's
I did
crazy.
a few weeks ago. I pointed at my keyboard, and it freaked me out. My keyboard is filthy.
Oh yeah, that's the downside.
Yeah, don't do that.
Yeah, the other thing is with the iPhone 13 Pro is you got the cinematic mode video. Do you ever use that?
I tried it. It was pretty funny. My husband, Steve, was sitting across from me. We were drinking wine at an outdoor picnic table. And my son-in-law was kind of back behind him to his left. So I said, okay, Steve, I'm going to focus on you now. I want you to look over at Nolan, and I'm going to do the cinematic mode. It is the creepiest video you've ever seen because Steve just something about the way he looked at him. I never tried it again because it just freaked me out.
Yeah. And you know, see, that's the thing about cinematic mode. I think Apple spent so much time talking about pull focus that I don't think that's the feature. The real feature is just, if I want to shoot video of my wife and have the background blurry, but her in focus, it can do that. And don't bother with trying to change the focus point, but just get nice video of a person. It's like portrait mode, but for video. I feel like Apple bungled the message on that.
Yeah, because I didn't even realize it would do that.
Yeah, well, see, there you go. You spend a little bit of time thinking about Apple. Yeah, so next time Steve is on the picnic table, just focus on him and leave the son-in-law blurred out in the background. That gives you plausible deniability later.
It kind of reminds me of when portrait mode first came out for photos, where it was pretty janky, and it's gotten better over time. I hope and trust that they can do it with this feature as well, because it would be really cool if it was like nice and sharp where it's supposed to be, and the focus and it wander around. But in its current state, I haven't been super impressed with it.
Even when photos were janky with portrait mode, though, it was still pretty magical. You could every once in a while get that shot.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And to be honest, I actually am a bigger fan of cinematic mode in its current iteration than most people I know, because, you know, of this project Daisy and I have been doing at Disneyland. I tried a few times bringing my good camera, and it's like, again, it's like this big, heavy thing. The stability is bad. I mean, you have to run a stabilization software to get anything usable. Whereas the iPhone, you don't even need a stabilizer. It's all stable already. It fits in your pocket. You don't like, I don't have $1,000 lens on the end. So if I drop it, I'm going to cry right in the middle of Disneyland. And so I've shot a bunch of video with the cinematic mode of Daisy in Disney, and it looks pretty good. I mean, I'll grant you, it's not as good as if you had like a fancy Sony or a, you know, whatever camera with a good lens on it, but it's good enough, you know. I don't know. I hope people are trying it, because I feel like it's something that can be useful. This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by 1Password. Go to 1password.com/MPU in all caps to get 20% off your plan. With 1Password, it's the people-first password management application. With 1Password, you can create, store, and autofill passwords in a single click to protect your accounts, collaborate securely, and keep your secrets safe with the password manager you'll love to use. 1Password is the choice of companies like IBM and Slack, but it's also the choice of the Sparks family, because they have family plans to really help you keep your entire family secure on the internet. 1Password is the easiest and safest way to share logins, passwords, and credit cards with your family members without putting them out there on the internet. My wife and kids and I have been sharing a 1Password for family accounts for years. We're big fans. The beauty is you just have to remember 1Password, and then the application takes care of the rest. Occasionally, I get emails from people asking about my use of 1Password. They've been in business over 15 years, and I've been there since the beginning. I met the original developer of 1Password in Tinytown at Macworld way back in the day. And people ask, well, what happens if they get hacked? Well, 1Password has designed their entire system around making sure that if they get hacked, you won't have any problems. And in their 15 years of business, they've never been hacked. But even if they did, number one, there's no single point of failure, so there's no easy way to get in. They never know your account password. Your secret key is yours alone. They don't have it. And everything is encrypted to keep your information safe. The only data that lives on the 1Password servers is the encrypted vault data, which nobody can read without your secret key, which is on your device. It's a very clever setup and a great way to protect you. I've always felt like my 1Password account gives me both convenience and security, which is what I'm looking for. I want the ability to use my passwords anywhere, but I also want secure passwords that are protected. And 1Password gives me both of those. So I have a family plan. Me and Daisy share it along with our kids. You can get one yourself. Just go to 1password.com/MPU. Make that in all caps, and you can sign up for that family plan. In addition to helping you generate and save your passwords, you can also have secure data. I always feel like it's just a second layer of protection on my iPhone, so I can put my truly secure data in the 1Password vault. And even if somebody was able to unlock my phone, they still wouldn't be able to get it. So go check it out yourself. Once again, that's 1password.com/MPU. Let them know you heard about it at the Mac Power Users and start protecting yourself and your family today.
So, Allison, one thing that came up during our pre-gaming call last week was your exploration of the world of diagramming as a way to talk about or to show an idea in a blog post. And I'd like to talk a little bit about that because it's not something that I've really done much of over the years. And you had sent us some examples, and we'll have some examples in the show notes. How did you end up with this as something you do, and what tools are you using to make these images?
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm a big mind mapping fan, and I use iThoughts for that and love that because it's on the iMac or on the Mac and on the iPad. And again, go back and forth. Everything syncs flawlessly. It's a great app. And when I've tried to explain a couple of things, I started noticing that I was fighting the tool. And I thought, you know what, a diagram would be a better way to go. And there's a free web service called diagrams.net. And I believe it's actually run by Atlassian, who does, they do some web services or wiki stuff and enterprise work. So they have a real business model, and that's why they can make this free. And they also have a desktop app. It's very confusing. The website used to be called draw.io. The desktop app is still called draw.io, but the website is now diagrams.net. Try to keep those pieces in your head. But it's a really easy, well-made tool for making diagrams that cost you absolutely nothing. It's not perfect. It's a little bit hard to use at times, but I find it's a great way to lay things out. And the place I actually started doing it was when we went on travel. We went on a really complicated trip to Dubai, India, and Nepal. And we had, 12 plane flights, 15 hotels, trying to keep track of what city we were going to be in on what night and where we were going to be. I wanted to be able to show my family, where we would be at these different times. And this diagram, it's one of my favorites. I would walk up to the immigration people and simply hand them the paper. I had a little, a little sleeve and everything. And it was great because they'd go, okay, got it. Because they always ask you, where are you staying? All those kind of questions. And I just had it on a diagram, so I never had to remember what it was or flip through a bunch of paper. Believe it or not, another thing I've used it for is we have a really complicated method of doing Christmas. Because I've got family in San Diego and family in other closer cities. And then we go up and visit Steve's family. And there's dogs and cats to put in different places. And people go on vacations after Christmas and figuring out where all the cars are and making sure everybody knows where they're supposed to be. And so I make one of those diagrams every year for Christmas. And I've done it all with diagrams.net.
It's such a powerful tool. So you told us about this last week, and I've been fiddling with it the last week. And I'm really impressed with it. And I think that not only does it do a good job of working with on your browser, it integrates with a bunch of good services like Dropbox, Notion. I had just ran a script on it this morning, and I put it into Obsidian with what they call an iframe, which is now I'm getting super nerdy. But there's like a lot of stuff you can do with this stuff. And the idea of having your diagramming tool on the internet, so long as you haven't got sensitive data in it, is something I think is worth checking out.
Well, and that's why the desktop app is cool too, because I can do, like, the family diagram is not on the internet.
Yeah.
But the other ones I usually do on the website. The one I was really excited about in October when Apple announced the M1 Pro and M1 Max in the laptops, I couldn't figure out what all these different models were because there were so many different decision points, right? There's how many CPU cores do you need? How many GPU cores? How much RAM? What the power adapter can be affected. Literally, the number of cores you choose in your CPU affects the size of your power adapter. There's all these interdependencies that are really complicated. And so I made a diagram of that, and it got a lot of traction. That one was pretty popular. And I was able to lay it out in a clean way that you can see the repercussions of your decisions at any point. You can say, okay, I only need a 24-core GPU. Well, that turns out that means you can have 32 or 64 gigabytes of RAM. But if you went to 16-core, you could only have 16 or 32 gigabytes of RAM. These decisions were difficult without being able to see this. There's two things the diagram doesn't show. How much is it going to cost? And which everybody wanted me to add. And I said, no, that's like 128 more pieces of information.
Yeah.
And the other thing it doesn't show is, wait, what was the second thing? There were two things. Oh, whether you need any of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that.
No. I mean, I'd love to have an overlay that says I do video streaming to YouTube, but I don't do much encoding locally. Boom, this is the path you should take. There's none of that.
Yeah. It is interesting, the idea of, RAM and how much memory you can get. Like Steven just bought the Mac Studio Max version. So you're not allowed to get 128 gigabytes of RAM. It just doesn't fit,
exist.
And if you had needed that, but you didn't need the Ultra chip, you really didn't have an option. And that's kind of one of the costs of having everything in, one silicon wafer. And
definitely
there's a lot of good things about that, but there's some bad things too. One of which is, at certain levels, you just don't get the RAM. You don't have the availability of the RAM.
Mm-hmm.
The other, that existence of the Mac Studio spawned another diagram because what I wanted to illustrate was where the M1, M1 Pro, M1 Max, and M1 Ultra chips go into which kind of models. And it turns out there are 7 different M1 devices. The 13-inch MacBook Pro, the MacBook Air, the 24-inch iMac, the Mac Mini, and 3 different models of iPads.
Yeah.
But if you go M1 Pro, you can only get that in the MacBook Pro 14 or 16-inch.
Yeah.
There is no Mac Studio with an M1 Pro. And I think I should have left like a hole in the diagram saying, what's going to fill this? Is it going to be an M1, a Mac Mini with a Pro, or is it going to be an M1 with a Pro, or a Mac Studio with a Pro? But I wanted to illustrate that. So that was another diagram I did this year in the Apple M1 Mac family. And I dated it March 2022, because I wanted to make sure I was ready to put a new version out when the next thing comes up.
Yeah. Now, what do you guys think? Is the new Mac Mini, because there's been rumors of a redesign. I mean, I think it'd be only natural, but actually maybe not, since the footprint is the same as the Mac Studio. But do you think there's going to be a Mac Mini that gets beyond the M2, that there'll be a M1 Pro Mac Mini?
I don't know. I think that Apple, at least so far in this, has been really content to keep the consumer machines consumer. And it's not as simple as the Grid of 4, Allison, to your point in this blog post, but it seems like they're pretty okay with like, hey, this is the consumer thing, and they all have this chip. And if you need more than that, then we have these other solutions for you. Now, the Mac Mini may be the one machine that could straddle those lines a little bit, but I also sort of have this hunch that maybe the next Mac Mini won't look like they have for the last 10 years, and maybe there'll be more distinction between it and the Mac Studio visually that kind of helps answer the question.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because if they were going to make an M1 Pro Mac Studio, why didn't they just do that?
Mm-hmm.
And so that means it would only go on the Mac Mini, but then can you put it in a Mac Mini without a big heatsink? Then it becomes a Mac Studio. Or does the Mac Mini just become a fat Mac? What happens there?
Well, if you look historically, they had two grades of Mac Mini. They had the consumer one and the Pro one. And to me, I feel like probably the Pro, if you look at that Pro chip, which fits into MacBook Pros just fine, that don't have the same cooling system as the Mac Studio. I could see a world where they come out with an M2 Mac Mini and maybe a M1 Pro like Mac Mini. That's a step up. And so instead of having 8 or 16 gigabytes of RAM, you have 16 or 32, and you've got the M1 Pro chip. And I mean, historically, they've had that product, and now they had an Intel version. I don't know if they're still selling it or not, but up until recently, they're still selling something in that slot. So I don't know. I mean, it's Apple. Who the heck knows? I mean, but I could see them having 2 tiers of Mac Mini, and that would fill the gap nicely. But I could also see them just saying, forget it. We're just going to have the M2 Mac Mini, and there is no desktop M1 Pro.
Do you guys realize how long it's been since an entirely new model of Mac existed with a whole new name? The Mac Studio.
I bet Steven knows.
I think it's 16 years.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess it's the Intel transition, whenever that was, because MacBook, the one port MacBook reused that name. So yeah, I guess it's like MacBook Pro, Mac Pro, that sort of time frame.
But I would even argue that wasn't really a new class of machine.
No, it was just a rebranding, really.
I really think that maybe the first class of machine was the MacBook Air was the last time there was a new class of Mac. The original one with the shuttle bay door on the USB port.
The one in the envelope?
Yeah. I mean, because that was a completely different kind of Mac. I think there's a good argument to be made there. That was a new class. Ultralight, it was the first ultralight.
Yeah, I'm talking about a whole name, too. The Mac Studio.
The MacBook Air was a new name, too.
That's a type of MacBook. Just Mac Studio. There's nothing before it, right? It is unique. There's nothing. It's not a variation on a theme.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. But Steve and I were talking when that first announcement came down. What this really does is it takes the brakes off. So the Mac Pro is going to be crazy, ridiculous, and expensive. I mean, they made the Mac Studio for most of us, and then the very few people for whom that is not enough, get your checkbook out, gang. Here it comes. Have you ever owned a Mac Pro, Studio, Allison?
No. We had cheese grater Macs back in the day before the laptops came out, but no.
Yeah, me either. Well,
I did until very recently.
Oh, you no longer own it?
No, it's been sold.
Oh, okay. Well,
moved on.
Did you give it a hug before you sent it off?
It was sadder than I thought it would be.
I bet. I think you did the right thing, though. Get some money out of it while you can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there was too much value in it for it to go straight into the collection. I can find another one in 15 years. It'll be okay.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of tips your hand to what we're going to be talking about later. That you must like your new machine.
Yeah, I do. I do. Allison, I did have a question to circle back to the diagramming for a second. I'm not a huge mind map person. I just don't really think that way. But when I do use that as a tool, I have a tendency to sit down like with my iPad and use my Apple Pencil. And it just feels kind of like a visual way of putting something together. When you're sort of in this creative process of putting something together visually in a diagram, is that a tool that you pick up the iPad for? Do you have that relationship to it that I do? Or is this a pretty Mac-centric workflow for you?
This has all been Mac-centric. I'm trying to think about whether diagrams.net would let you draw with the pencil. I hadn't actually thought about that. I should try that. I do use my pencil, and I use it, and I think David's going to love this in particular. I use it when I need to think. And what I mean by that is in the old days when I was working and I had to do a lot of annoying, disgusting PowerPoint presentations nobody wanted to listen to, I found that if I sat down in front of the computer and I opened PowerPoint, I would spend 80% of my time figuring out how to indent so that it made sense and, getting the font right and changing the font size. And I find it even worse in Keynote. Keynote irritates me quite a bit. But what I discovered was if I went to the recycle bin next to the copier and I grabbed a bunch of pieces of paper and I just started writing out my thoughts, scribbling with a pencil, I was able to get the ideas down, and then I could always format it later. So I do that now in my new life here. And in particular, one of the places I do it is in programming, because I find if I try to figure something out typing, I will have to make the syntax correct. But I can write pseudocode if I'm scribbling. I can't make myself type incorrectly. I have to be precise. But with the pencil, I can just draw it out. I can draw little diagrams with, cruddy looking diagrams. And I try to resist the making good rectangles. I use Notability. And if you take care, it'll make a perfect rectangle. But don't do that. Just scribble them, draw arrows, draw lines, whatever you need to do, and scribble out my ideas. And I can change colors and get the thoughts going. And I can often figure out a solution. I step away from my desk and I sit in an easy chair and I scribble. And that is how I think, is with the pencil.
That makes sense. And it frees you from all the technical wizardry, right? You can just actually think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are times that I'll do that just with like a pen and paper. If something's going to become a graphic, or if I'm working on, a layout for the Relay website or something, it's like, I don't actually want all this to like snap to a grid and be perfect. I just want to let the ideas flow. And sometimes that little action of it snapping to a rectangle is enough. Like, no, that's not what I want, because now I'm going to be distracted and making sure everything's pixel perfect. When sometimes you don't want that when you're in that sort of creative space.
Yeah, I think it's a remarkable way to do it. I use it for something else really strange. I use it for crafts. So I cross stitch and I knit and I crochet. And in cross stitching, a lot of times you want to put some letters onto a grid. So I turn on the grid on Notability, and now I've paid for it, so I get even smaller, tighter grid. So I can figure out how the letters are going to go and where they're going to fit, and what are they going to look like, and what font I can use that I found online. And I also, I did a really complicated knitting pattern recently. This is a great blog post, by the way. You guys love this one, how I knit like a programmer, because this was a series of blocks across the knitting pattern. So 4 blocks, and with the 4 blocks were iterating at a different rate. So one of them was 6 tall and one of them was 4 tall. So they were kind of going over each other. So each time you went across, it was a mystery what the next row was going to be. And I don't know how normal people can follow a pattern that is explaining that. And so I wrote it out as like code going, do loop here. This is an embedded do loop inside the other one. And that was the only way I could figure it out. And that was all done with pencil.
Yeah, I'm looking at this blog post now. This is incredible. I love that it's how your brain solved that problem.
I've been struggling with delegation lately. So I've been trying to break down all of my workflows. Like, what do I do from, an idea to posting a blog post or some of the other stuff that I make? And by putting it into these flow charts, I'm able to say, oh, well, here's a block that doesn't need to be me. And then I can start thinking about delegation. And I've been doing all this in OmniGraffle. But, playing with diagrams.net, it's very tempting just to start doing it there. I mean, everything snaps. I like the grid. This is a really nice resource.
Yay.
You do have some posts on your website about dead Macs, though. And it made me sad. You've got all these posts about Macs since Steve Jobs returned, and all of them have the skull and crossbones on them. It's very sad.
Well, the purpose of that one was Tom Merritt was asking the question of whether, on Daily Tech News Show, he was asking me the question about whether the current setup of Macs is more confusing than it was when Steve Jobs came back. So I made a diagram where I looked up all of the models of Macs that existed the day Steve Jobs came back. By the way, did you know he left and came back on the same day? It was like September 16th. 97 was when he came back, and it was September 16th when he left. Anyway, fun fact to know and tell.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I made this diagram, and I wanted to show when they died so that you could see, did he kill them off when he got there, or did they die a natural death? And of all of them, only 2 of them survived until till their natural time.
Yeah, it was. It's famous now, right? The grid of 4, having basically 4 computers for sale: professional, consumer, desktop, and notebook. And in your post, you go into that's a lot more complicated now. And even in just talking about it here, it's like, why isn't the M1 Pro and something else? Like, where do these lines fall? But yeah, all those old Macs with the skull and crossbones over them, it was a little dark for me. I'll just say
it is sad. It's an ugly diagram too, because every Mac looked different, so the color palette is revolting.
Yeah,
I don't
that's
like
how
looking
things
at it
were
myself.
in the 90s. A lot of different beige going on.
But it does make you see why he killed them. He looked at it and he said, I don't even know how to tell my friends and family which one to buy.
That 20th anniversary Mac, man.
It's beautiful.
That is not a pretty computer.
Come on. Man.
I remember when that came out, looking at it, because, back in the day, there was a store called, I don't know if it's around anymore, called the Sharper Image,
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And they'd sell you like $100 back scratcher or some stupid thing, right? I always felt like the 20th anniversary Mac was what Sharper Image customers went for.
Aww.
It was very much of its time, and it to be cool and futuristic, they had to make some choices, and not all of those have aged well, but that's okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, it was good enough for Jerry Seinfeld.
That's right.
Well, there you go. There you go.
But yeah, I mean, I can't help you if you don't think it's not beautiful, but I don't think it's ugly. I think it has a special place in Mac history, and I got one right here. It's right over my shoulder. You can come apologize in person, David. Next time you're here.
I will. I'm very sorry, Mac. It is when you look at all these old Macs, it is maybe I'm just an element of my time, but I feel like computers are much more beautiful now than they've ever been. I mean, all that plastic, there was only so much you could do.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. You're just not completely right either.
I don't know. That Perform is just disgusting. I mean, that's really
the one with the yeah. There were some choices they made. What can we say?
And laptops, they had a certain look for a long time, just because that's what they had to be.
I love that they went from those old black models to colors to white to then charging extra for black. Remember that?
Yeah.
On the MacBooks, they got away with charging extra for Macs, and people, ooh, I'm getting the black one.
Yeah. I actually just wrote an article about that a couple of weeks ago, and people kind of came out of the woodwork of like, yeah, this is the one I got because it was so cool, or I didn't get it because I didn't want to spend the extra money. And when you've been doing it as long, Allison, as you have, you can really see those like big eras, right? Like we went from beige and Apple being in trouble, and then Jobs coming back and like the great simplification, and now they're the biggest company on the planet, depending on what day of the week it is, and they have all of these product lines. It's like different from how it was before, but it's also their similarities, and that's one thing that I like about what you publish, because you have that perspective, because you've been interested in this since the very beginning. And I certainly try to fake it, but I wasn't there in '84, and I think that's something cool that you bring to your audience, and I'm sure they love it.
Well, thanks. I do have to say this chart is only complete because I asked Adam Angst of Tidbits to check it for me, and I was missing like 8 of them. So, I don't know. I didn't scroll in Mac Tracker or something. I missed a whole bunch of them. So when you want the precision and the history, I may do fairly well, but Adam's the man.
You talk about paying extra for color, but you do that now with the M1 iMac, where at the base model there's only a few colors, and if you buy the higher end spec one, and granted it has more bells and whistles, but you also have more colors available. And I have to wonder that if the rumors are true and we're going to get an M2 MacBook Air with colors, are they going to do the same thing? Are you going to have to pay extra to get the higher spec if you want the certain colors?
And oddly, in phones, it goes the other way, right? The cheaper ones have the colors. But if you're a pro, you clearly only need blue.
Well, I mean, last week I took on the job of Apple Vice President of Naming. I would also like to take on the job of Vice President of Color Distribution, and I would fix that immediately on day one. That's my campaign.
The colors. Colors matter. Colors are fun.
Yeah. I just think that there's a certain part of being a person who likes Apple products that you like whimsy. You like the tortoise and the hare and the control center. There's been whimsy in their products over the years. I think they lost that for a while. And I hope that comes back. And, putting colors in the Pro products would be a nice way to do that. I'd also, this is something that'll probably never come true, but I'd love to see an Apple product with the rainbow logo on it again one day, even if it's just like a special product,
I don't know. That would look so out of place nowadays. But maybe if it's the same kind of glow through, but it glows through in different colors,
That'd
maybe
be cool.
rotating colors, that'd be cool.
Although, I'm looking at the 20th anniversary Mac, and it's got a cute little rainbow logo in the middle, so I'm changing my opinion. Got that little rainbow right on the front.
This episode of Mac Power Users is made possible by Indeed. Hunting down answers to your questions can be rewarding. Finding what you're looking for is fantastic, but when it comes to hiring, you probably don't have time to do as much searching as you would like, to spend as much time as you possibly can to find a great candidate with the right skills. And that's where there's Indeed, the best hiring partner your team can get. If you're hiring, you need Indeed, because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applications that meet your must-have requirements, or else you just don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple jobs hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you need one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners with you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, you'll sponsor a post, and as soon as you do, you'll get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job description. You can invite them to apply right away, plus you only pay for qualified and quality applications that, again, meet your must-have requirements. It's pretty incredible how easy Indeed makes it to find great talent. According to ComScore, Indeed is the #1 job site worldwide. And you'll be in good company. Join more than the 3 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. Start hiring right now with a free $75 sponsored job credit and upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/MPU. This offer is valid through April 30th. Go to Indeed.com/MPU to claim your $75 credit before April 30th. Indeed.com/MPU. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? Then you need Indeed. Our thanks to Indeed for their support of the show.
Allison, in addition to making your podcast, you write everything out. And as you were talking about earlier in the show, that's a little bit of work. How do you do that?
I usually start thinking in Ulysses because I can do it on the Mac and on the iPad. And so in the morning, I sit in bed having a cup of coffee, and I'll tend to write sometimes from the iPad. And it's a good place to think again, because I don't get to mess around with a lot. I get frustrated fairly quickly, though, because part of the way I think is with images. So as I'm trying to describe something, like right now I'm in the middle of writing up a post about Audio Hijack and the new changes with Audio Hijack 4, and I need the screenshots to picture what I'm going to say, which seems kind of counterintuitive. A lot of people like Markdown because you can't do that kind of thing, sort of back to our write with a pencil when you want to think story. But I think along those images, what do I want to capture when I'm talking about this? What is the thing I'm going to try to show? And so I fairly quickly will switch over to Mars Edit, which is where I actually create the blog posts. I wish Mars Edit ran on the iPad. I just wish that with every fiber of my being, and I bother Daniel Jalkut about it on a regular basis. That's an app that allows me to write still in Markdown, and I can just drag in an image, and I've set up a bunch of little, I forget what he calls them, but they're basically settings you can set so that I have, I like all of my images to be in figures, and I like them right justified most of the time, but I've got a right, left, and center justified option, and it puts in the alt text for me for the image. I can change it, but it takes the name of the file, and I'm always careful. I name my files according to what I want the alt text to be, so I only have to name it once. And then I can change the width and make it fit and look nice while I'm working. And Mars Edit then is where I publish from. And again, I wish that was on the iPad so I could do a little bit more back and forth.
Amen.
But that is where I usually finish it up. Did you say amen?
I did say amen. Yeah, I love Mars Edit. I publish everything on 512 pixels through it, and would love an iOS version of it for sure.
Yeah, everybody write to Daniel Jalkut, red-sweater.com, is that right?
Redsweater.com.
It's Red Sweater. I don't know if there's a dash or not, but it is Red Sweater. But so you write, so on the iPad you write in Ulysses, and then at some point you move it over to Mars Edit on your Mac. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, there's an export to Markdown, and I use that to then just copy it all and paste it over, which is kind of a waste. Another thing I do like about writing in Ulysses is it lets me know how long it's going to take me to read it. I mean, it's not accurate, but it gives me some sort of an indication that you've now written 11 minutes worth of content. I don't like my show to be any shorter than 40 minutes long. I get complaints from Stephen Getz if it is. So I have to keep it at least 40 minutes. And so I'm constantly looking at the timing of all of the pieces that I'm writing to see whether I've got enough content. I'm actually working on a web app right now that I call Time Adder, and it's functional, but I only use it locally. It's not ready for prime time. But I need to know how much do all these times add up to. And that's actually a really hard thing to do. Like you'd think you could pop home at Excel or numbers and say, just add these times. But those applications all look at time as absolute time, not elapsed time. So like if you add 50, what's that?
You can do that in numbers.
Yeah, yeah. Would you like to see my blog post on this subject of how hard it is to do? Okay. It is really hard to do. You can do it, but you have to do a bunch of faffing about. And I think the last call, I got it to work, but it wouldn't subtract numbers properly. So like if you take 59 minutes and you add 1 minute to it, you will not get 60 minutes. You'll get like noon or something. I mean, they don't think in absolute time. And so I wrote some formulas in Excel that will do it, and I have that method to do it. But I'm making this web app so that you could put in the names of the different things that you're adding up, and then all of the times, and you can put positive or negative numbers, so you can say add and subtract, and then export it like as a CSV or something like that. But I use that myself to figure out how long my show is going to be.
Isn't there a cell format called duration? I thought you just put duration formatted cells and you can add them.
I will send you a link to my blog post.
I believe you. I'm not questioning you. I just was asking. I thought that using the duration cell format won't work for you?
Yeah, that was a trick that I learned after I'd done a lot of the work up front on that. But it was I think that's the one that you can't subtract.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. The blog post is called "How to Add Elapsed Time in Excel," and then it goes on into numbers towards the end.
Yeah, like I was thinking, because like for my field guides, we use an error table because it's kind of shared with a few people, and we use a duration field in that, so we can keep a running log of how long, how many hours the damn thing's got to, and that works fine. But I only add, I don't do any subtraction. I just want to know, if you add up all these videos, how many hours is this?
Here's a quote from my blog post. Formatting as elapsed time is definitely easier because numbers has a format called duration. That's easier to remember and use than hours, minutes, seconds, but it's just as dumb. If you look at the formula bar, numbers represents 130000 as 1 a.m.
Yeah, because a duration field doesn't represent a time. It represents a length.
But that's not what it does. It still thinks it's time. It still thinks it's absolute. And there is a way to, like I said, you could beat it into submission except for the subtraction thing.
All right. Well, that's a little rabbit hole. But it's remarkable to me, though, that you script out your whole show. I mean, that's impressive.
It's necessary, too. What I found, I tried not to. And this was before the deafblind guy wrote to me, but I tried really hard not to. I thought, okay, well, that's making me stilted. I'm reading. That's not going to be natural sounding. And I found what I would do is I would write it all out, and then I would try to convert it into bullets. So I was removing valuable information and making it less, making there not be a blog post to go along with it. And I remember somebody saying to me one time, Allison, you really shouldn't post all that as blog posts because people are going to read instead of listen. And I said, God, that'd be terrible if they got the content the way they wanted it. You're right.
Exactly.
Stop that. But I write the way I speak. So my writing is not technically correct. It's the way I would say it.
No, it's written as a script. I mean, you can see, like, I can hear your voice when I read it, and I think that's the way you should do it. So
if I could do it off the cuff, I absolutely would, David. I mean, Adam does it, and I don't know, Adam Christensen, I don't know how he does it.
Yeah. Well, it's impressive. And then what are you doing for like because you're doing all these different platforms with your audience. You've got video, audio. What's your tool set for that?
So for everything, the center of the universe is everything from Rogue Amoeba. I was asked at AltConf to win a T-shirt or something like that. What single Mac app would keep you from ever leaving the platform? And I instinctively said Audio Hijack. There's no question. Without Audio Hijack, nothing would work. And you guys are on board that, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I use Audio Hijack to capture my audio. I don't use a mixer. I tried using a mixer for a while. I had Victor Cajiao help me set it up, help me figure out which one to buy, told me how to set all the knobs. And it was always a mystery to me. It was this giant piece of equipment on my desk, and I hated every minute of it. I got rid of it, and I do everything in Audio Hijack. And between Audio Hijack to capture the audio and record the audio, like what we're doing right now, I'm doing a backup recording for the guys here. But I also use SoundSource I also use Loopback in order to combine sources. So when I'm doing my live show, like I said, we use Mimo Live for the production. I run that on my machine, and then I'm sending my video and audio over to Steve on his machine, and then he produces is pushing it out to YouTube Live. And that gets embedded on our website while the show's going on. But my audio is being combined using Loopback. So I combine Hindenburg, my audio workstation, my recording software for the live show. I combine that with my voice so that I can send both of those over to Discord. So the Discord chat can, if they just want to listen instead of watch, they can listen inside Discord and hear my voice and hear the recordings when I play things back. That's for most everything I do. Oh, and SoundSource added a huge thing. With SoundSource, you can change the volume and mute specific sources. So when we've got the live show going, I can hear Steve in Mimo Live, and I can hear him in Discord because he's sending his audio to Discord. But I only want to hear one of Steve's. So during the actual production, when we're actually going, I mute Discord. So Discord's running and it's sending audio, but with SoundSource, I can click a button in my menu bar and say, I don't want to hear that. Or if sometimes his audio is too loud for me in Mimo Live, I can turn Mimo Live down independently from my normal speakers. And it's life-changing. And at my previous audio interface, I didn't have a mute button, and it turns out Mimo Live can give you a mute button. I can see my microphone right now, and to make this a terrible podcast, I could click it right now, and it would mute my mic. I changed mic interfaces, and now I have one. I think we're Wave XLR buddies, Elgato Wave XLR buddies now, David.
You and I are. I think Steven is on fancier gear.
But, I've got the Wave XLR on my streaming PC though, and it's fantastic.
I gave up a $700 Universal Audio Thunderbolt 3 interface, and I have never been happier going down to the Wave XLR for $150 or whatever it was. That other interface was it was hideous. I'm the wrong audience for it. It's not for podcasters. It comes with how big was it? I think it's a 9 gigabyte driver file.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. So
yeah. And one big dial. And
one big dial.
And when you mute it, it just turns all red. So you know when you're muted. It's just great. But just on the subject of Audio Hijack, Paul and his team make excellent audio tools. I don't think there's anybody making software for the Mac that understands the audio stack better than they do. But I think what they don't get enough credit for is this is complex stuff, and their user interfaces are so good. I mean, like even Loopback, just the way you connect things and the pipes, you connect them together. They just released Audio Hijack 4. I guess we should mention that on the show. And the user interface got even better on that. If you want to work with audio tools, you shouldn't have to try and discern what the heck's going on. And the Audio Hijack and the Rogue Amoeba software in general just makes it so easy to see exactly what's going on.
Some of the stuff I do, you can do like with audio MIDI setup, but it's a brain tease to figure it out. You do it in Audio Hijack, it's like, oh, I need this block, and look, there's a little line between them, and it goes. It's so easy. The other thing is, it's for the three of us, it's incredibly great visually because you drag these blocks in and you see a little dotted yellow line. You can tell the audio's flowing. It looks great, but it's also built from the ground up, accessible to VoiceOver.
Yeah.
And that's the amazing thing. So you've got these blocks in a row, and when you move a block, it'll say 1, 1, 2, 1, 3. So you know the orientation of them with respect to each other. I've taught not one but two blind people to use Audio Hijack, and they were able to use it immediately after like an hour with me.
Yeah. You do so much good work, Allison, with, talking about accessibility and software. I remember one year you and I spoke at Macworld together back when there was a Macworld, and you did a session where you wore a blindfold for the whole session. That was at Macworld that you did that, right?
Yeah, it was a tech talk that I called Blindfolded. When I was done, I think my favorite feedback on that was right after that, we went and watched Don McAllister speak. And he said, you know what? I was really nervous getting up here, but I just watched Allison do hers blindfolded. So I figured this has got to be easier than that.
Yeah, it does help.
That was yeah, right. It was really, really challenging. I wanted to learn to use voiceover, and I figured if I had to do a presentation blindfolded, I better learn it. The iPhone is really easy, really, really easy. I mean, it was hard to learn to type on it, but everything else was super easy. The Mac was really, really hard. And I actually crashed and burned on that. Unfortunately, I did the criminal thing. What is the one thing you don't do when you're doing a presentation? Change it right before you go on stage.
Yeah, it's usually a bad idea.
Right before I went on stage, I took my presentation. I thought, oh, it'll be easier if it's on my desktop. And then somewhere during it, I somehow picked it up, and it was following me around everywhere I went. And to try to get it off, I was like hitting spacebar. I was opening things like personal information on screen. It's just a mess. I finally ended up having and it became an audience participation moment. They really enjoyed it, but not quite what I was hoping for there. But the feedback I got was people said, no, that showed us how hard it is, and that's good for us to know,
There's a guy named Derek Story, and we should probably get him back on the show. I haven't talked to him in years, but he used to always give the presentation at Macworld on Aperture, the software that Apple used to make to, help you manage your photo library and do some edits. And one year, I remember sitting in the speaker room talking to Derek, and he was all ready. He was going to give like a 2-day seminar on Aperture. And the next morning, the day Macworld started, Apple released Aperture 3.
Oh, gosh.
With no warning. And I remember just looking in the room where he was sitting in there downloading the new app, and just he had the saddest look on his face I've ever seen on a human. Could you imagine building a 2-day presentation and finding out the software is obsolete the morning of the presentation?
Jeez. And that was a big change too.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, one of the reasons I do the accessibility stuff is because it's really fun. Yeah. I really, really enjoy it. I enjoy learning about it. Steve and I go every year, didn't for 2 years, but we just went a couple of weeks ago to the CSUN Assistive Tech Conference, and it's so fun. They have the coolest toys, the most interesting stuff there, and so it's just really enjoyable. And if you keep thinking about accessibility, it's not just that it's the right thing to do, it's the obvious thing to do to me. Yeah. I did a talk at Blog World I entitled Increase Your Audience Size Through Accessibility. So if you're a blogger and you're not making your stuff accessible, you're literally missing millions of people who could be enjoying your content. And everybody wants to know how to increase the audience. Well, don't exclude all of them. That doesn't make any sense. And in doing it, one of the easy things is putting alt tags on your images. Oh no, I know what I was talking about. There used to be visual only CAPTCHAs, those annoying things where you got to, click on all the stop signs or whatever. Yeah. They used to have visual only versions of those. Now everything's got audio as well. But I said, don't ever put a visual only CAPTCHA on your website, or you've basically put a brick wall in front of anybody who's blind. And after I finished, this guy came up to me and he said, Allison, I can't believe I didn't know about this. I run the Section 508 website for the United States government. Section 508 is the rules that say all government stuff needs to be accessible. And I didn't know this. And I was happy I'd taught him, but on the other hand, so what kind of training did you have for this job if you didn't know the most obvious thing?
This episode of the Mac Power Users is brought to you by Electric. Go to electric.ai/MPU and unbury yourself from IT tasks. Moreover, get a free pair of Beats Solo 3 wireless headphones when you schedule a qualifying meeting. We've all served as tech support for friends and family, right? I think I am full-time tech support for my family. Every time we get together, there's somebody with a Mac or an iPad and a list of questions. But when it comes to work, if you're focused on building a business, you won't always have time to jump into the rescue when there's a tech issue that needs solving. The team over at Electric knows small businesses, maybe like yours, face these challenges. That's why they've solved this problem for you by operating as your IT department. Instead of spending your time sorting through unused application licenses, setting up employee laptops, and answering never ending IT questions from your team, you can build that empire. With Electric acting as your IT department, you can get back to what you're good at. Plus, you get a really cool IT platform to see and manage everything. Delegation isn't easy. I'm really bad at it because I'm such a control freak. And if you're listening to this show, you are passionate about your technology. So you're going to have an opinion as to how your employees use it, and you want to control that IT. But the fact is, that's not why your business exists. Your business exists for the thing that you make so well. You've got to let go of IT and let somebody else take care of it for you. And that's why Electric exists, to handle that so you can make the things you love. And for Mac Power Users listeners, Electric is offering a free pair of Beats Solo 3 wireless headphones for taking a qualified meeting. Just think about that. If Electric becomes your IT company, not only do you have someone solving the IT problems for you, you've got some cool headphones to listen to some music while you're focusing on the important work. So just go to electric.ai/MPU. That's electric.ai/MPU. Go there now, get your free pair of Beats Solo 3 headphones, and schedule a meeting. Thanks, Electric, for all of your support of the Mac Power Users.
So, Allison, we like to wrap up these workflow shows with guests talking about some favorite apps or services that we maybe didn't get to mention during the show. They can be on the Mac, they can be mobile, just something that you find sparks joy in your workflow or in life.
Well, one of the apps I want to talk about is called Folga. It's an app for creating tutorial guides with screenshots, text annotations, and then allows you to create beautiful documentation. Now, I was a big fan of a tool called Screen Steps, which they then later on spawned into something called Clarify, and I loved it so much I did ads for them. And they eventually abandoned it at $40. It just wasn't a sustainable business market. And so that was more for the home users. So Blue Mango Learning focuses on the businesses, and that works great. But in the intervening years, there have been a few companies who've tried to fill the spot left by Clarify. There was one called Stepshots Guides, but they've discontinued it. And out of the blue came a company or a product called Folga, and it's written by a guy named Oleksiy Srebrny. I have trouble pronouncing his name. He's a Ukrainian developer, and he is, I am not joking, the most excited developer I have ever met about people telling him what they think doesn't work right and they want to work differently in his software. And I've got emails I can send you that show him going, "Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. Thank you for telling me this doesn't work right." It's like, really? So it's a young app. It's a couple of years old, and he's just developing it better and better and better. It is an Electron app, and it does have some interface things that are very non-Mac app. But he's working on those things. Like right now, the settings sort of changes the whole window instead of being its own separate window that opens up, and he's gonna change that. But the annotation tools are great. The ability to take a whole bunch of screenshots one after another as you're going through a workflow. You know, you click this button, take a screenshot. Click this button, take a screenshot. And if you do that, you keep yourself in the flow of what you're trying to teach. And then you can go back and do the annotations, and the annotations are great. It's got a great blur tool. It's got a magnify tool, arrows and boxes and text and all that kind of stuff, numbered bullets, numbered buttons. So you can say, do this, this, and this in this order. And then the text stuff you can do, it's huge. I mean, it's got all the HTML elements like headings and quotes and code blocks. And you can even embed videos within those documents. And then the export options, you've got PDF and Word and PowerPoint if you want to do something like that. I disagree with that on religious means, but there's also an rich HTML export where you can post it online as a single file or give it to someone as a single file, and it's a beautiful export of your document in a web interface. It's really great, and it's a one-time cost. I want to say $70, I think, but it's
60
one time.
euros, 60 euros for a personal license, $100 for a business, and it's a lifetime license. That's very reasonable for software like this.
Yeah, and part of that's why I brought up the point that at $40 it wasn't tenable. It's $70 US for a personal license, 60 euro. They've got academic discounts. There's a free version. You can have 3 guides and see how it works and see if it's something you want to use. Super enthusiastic about this developer. And plus, he's from Ukraine and he just came back from bringing his parents home. So He lives in Germany now, but he just went and got his parents. He responded to me while he was doing that. That's how responsive this guy is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Anything else we think we should touch on?
The other tool that I really enjoy, and it's something probably a lot of people have used before, is Visual Studio Code. That's where I'm doing my programming now. And it's from Microsoft. It's a fabulous code editor. It's got a rich plugin architecture. I'm learning about using linters, and those are plugins that you can add to it. And it's just delightful. Bart and I do. Bart Buchatz is my partner in crime for Programming by Stealth, and we work together on a lot of other projects. And we've started doing everything in Git. And I use Visual Studio Code even when we're doing just pure text files. Like he does a security bit segment, and we do it all through Git, and I do it in Visual Studio Code, and that makes it it's really useful, and I think it's a great app. And it's free.
What kind of programming are you doing these days?
We started with HTML and CSS, and we worked our way through JavaScript, and now we're fixing to make a plan to actually edit or recreate Bart's amazing password generation tool. It's currently at xkpasswd.net, and we're going to do modules for that and bring it forward in technology. So he's basically tricked the audience into working for him, and so we're going to use modern tools. Right now, it's basically end of life because it's done in Perl and it uses a bunch of libraries that are not being advancing. Yeah. But xkpasswd.net is a fabulous tool for creating long, complex but memorable passwords.
Nice. What about on your phone? What's your favorite app on your home screen?
Ooh, Telegram. I'm a big old crazy Telegram fan. It's, in my opinion, it's definitely my favorite messaging app. It supports Markdown. It supports code blocks. It is cross-platform. You never have a blue bubble, green bubble problem. It has it updates instantaneously on every device you have. And I know at least 40% of your audience is saying, yeah, but the security is not as good as Signal. Absolutely a fact, true. It's end-to-end encryption only if you do a private chat. So if you want to, just do private chats and you're golden. But the encryption algorithm is homegrown. It's not standard and people can't see inside it. So a lot of people don't trust it. But Signal, I don't favor at all because it doesn't do Markdown. It doesn't do any rich text. It can't do code blocks. It doesn't sync seamlessly across my devices. So Telegram is where I've moved all of my family and friends.
Excellent. Well, Allison, it's so good to check in with you and hear about you and Steve and all the cool stuff you're doing over at Podfeet. And I'm glad that you are still making that show and still getting it out every Sunday.
You bet. As long as my body allows me to, I will keep doing it as long as I got voice.
Yeah, and I promise we are not going to wait for another 635 episodes before we have you back.
Maybe like 350 or so.
Cut it in half. Well, we could try for that, I guess.
You heard it here.
All right. Well, the funny thing about me and Allison is we've been friends for, 20 years. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And she lives about an hour from me, and we only see each other at places like Macstock, Macworld. We only see each other after both of us get on airplanes. We never actually meet up.
It's like 30 miles. I drive past your house on the way to San Diego.
Yeah, I think we're going to have to fix that at some point. But either way, thanks for coming on. Allison, where can people find you?
Well, the best place is podfeet.com, and you can find me on Twitter at podfeet. You will not find me on Facebook. You won't find me on Instagram. You won't find me on WhatsApp. But you can find me. We have a Slack group that's fantastic for the show, podfeet.com/Slack. And I hope you come join us sometime.
All right. And I want to thank our sponsors. That's Text Expander, 1Password, Indeed, and Electric. We are the Mac Power Users. You can find us over at relay.fm/MPU. We'll see you next time.